Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. An original adaptation written and read for you by Jon Buckeridge. Part 20. The Stench of Secrecy. Gawain stood still and silent in his rooms, carefully clutching the precious gift in his fingers. Lady Bertilac's words to him before she left echoed in his mind. This green girdle, this simple silk sash, had the power to protect him from any weapon under heaven? He had heard of such enchantments, of course. Arthur himself had once owned an enchanted scabbard that would protect him from all injury, but it had been stolen in yet another attack from Morgan Le Fay. But now, perhaps, he had something of equal worth and power, something that might let him survive the coming ordeal and live a little longer. Somewhere in his mind he felt he was being dishonest, somehow cheating at the rules of the challenge set by the Green Knight. But then the knight himself had begun a game that he could not lose and Gawain could not win, and so perhaps this redressing of the balance was all fair and fine. "Enough moralizing," said the voice in his head. "You may have a new hope of life. Go forth and live it." And Gawain decided that he would. He felt a great well of energy bubbling up within him. For the first time in a year, he felt a sense of hope. He let out a whoop of delight, washed away the shards of his sleepless night, and dressed in his best. Checking the door carefully, just in case Mallory was there lurking for him, he strode boldly out into the corridor and almost danced down the stairs. It was only when he reached the bottom that he realized the stairs had offered no challenge. All the aching and stiffness of the days before were finally gone, or enough that he could move easily for the first time in what felt like forever. Letting out another whoop of delight, he set out in search of the hugest, heartiest breakfast he could lay his hands on. It was only after breakfast that he realized it was New Year's Eve. He had known it, of course. He'd been actively counting down the days for the last year, but he hadn't really known it for what it was. For the last 12 months, his sole focus had been swallowed up by the thought that, at the end of it, he would most certainly die. Everything in him had been so focused on this being his last year that the idea of a new year seemed strangely redundant. In fact, the idea of a new anything had felt redundant. Now, though, with this fresh hope in his heart, the concept of a new year seemed like a very pleasant notion. The castle was packed full of guests for the celebration, and Gawain threw himself into the festivities with full force. He sang and danced and gamed and gambled merrily with the lords and ladies of the court all through the day. At one point he felt a sharp aching on his face, and thought that some of the bruising might not be so healed as he had hoped. But then he realized it was aching because he was smiling. He had spent the last year so buried in his thoughts that smiling, truly smiling for a long period of time, had become something of a stranger to him, and now his face ached for the effort. He thought back to the smiles he'd seen on the warm, welcoming faces in the Wirral, of Bertram, his ungainly face made beautiful by the addition of a smirking smile, and vowed that if he lived through the next day he would be a man who smiled like that, and warmed the hearts of those around him. In the afternoon, Lord Bertilac strode into the room, fresh-faced from his day hunting, and he greeted Gawain with glee. "Gawain, my man," the lord began, wrapping him in a bear-like embrace. "Right glad I am to see you up and about and making merry." "Right glad I am to be making merry, my lord," replied Gawain. There had been no small amount of wine, mead, and ale in the day's festivities, so merriment was in no short supply. "How was the hunt today?" "Ah, Gawain," said the big man, "a merry chase I was led on. Hours and hours it took me to bring down my quarry." "And what quarry was that, my lord?" asked Gawain. "A fox," Bertilac replied, taking a seat and gesturing Gawain to join him. "A fox, my lord?" Gawain asked. "Does that not seem beneath you? There are dozens, probably hundreds, within these woods and the land. Why hunt down such a creature? You cannot eat it, and it offers no threat that I can think of." "Oh, but this was no usual fox," replied Bertilac. "A normal fox I'd leave to go about his business, but this was the very lord of all foxes, old Reynard himself. I've been on the trail of this one for months now. Every night he works his way into the gardens of my grounds and makes merry with my chickens, geese, and rabbits. Were he just snatching a few for food, I could let that lie, but such a slaughter he inflicts. What he can't eat, he kills anyway, for the sheer sport of the kill, from what I can tell. No, this one needed to be brought down, and I finally did it." "Well," said Gawain, "congratulations, I suppose." "Why, thank you," replied Bertilac, "and in keeping with our agreement, here is your prize." He placed the fresh fox skin on the table in front of him, and Gawain, his head a little fuzzy from drink, was not quite sure what to say. He had seen skins before, everyone had, but this was somehow more raw, more real to him. "Come, Gawain," Bertilac chastised, "does this bother you? What do you think your boots are made of, What covers the book you read? What keeps you warm in the winter?" Gawain thought on it. Half his clothes were made of some hide or other, not to mention part of his armour, his gear, Gringolet's saddle, tack and harness, the list went on. "If it rankles with you, then forswear the killing of creatures and live without the fruits of it. It can be done, I assure you. But if you would partake in it, then you must be willing to come face to face with the costs of the kill." Gawain supposed the man was right. Still, there was something sad in seeing the creature there, for all the world looking like it was sleeping. Around him the celebration still swirled, but Gawain knew that for him the party was over. He was shaken from his considerations when Bertilac clapped him warmly on the shoulder. "Come, enough of your brooding. What have you won in the castle today that you must share with me, His grey-green eyes fixed on Gawain, and Gawain felt his mind begin to churn. Today, for the first time, he had won more than kisses from the castle. Surely he should hand over the green girdle to Lord Bertilac, as was their agreement. But if he did that, he would not have it to face the Green Knight. His whole hope of survival lay in that sash from Lady Bertilac, and without that, he was surely done for. Not to mention, came the voice in his mind, that you would have to explain why his wife is handing you tokens of affection. "Well, my lord," he told the man, pasting a smile on his face that was nowhere near the heartfelt one he had worn only hours ago, "today has been fine sport for me." Taking hold of Bertilac's face, he delivered 3 kisses, 2 on the lips and 1 on the cheek. "There you are, sir, as per our agreement." Lord Bertilac looked at him with those sea-storm eyes, and for a horrible second he feared Bertilac knew that he had concealed the truth. But then the lord's shaggy-haired face split in a huge grin, and he clapped Gawain on the shoulder again. "Ha ha ha! By St. Cuthbert, man, your hunting prowess is something to behold. Come, let us get another drink, and we can toast your health, and many more hunts to come." "Thank you, my lord," said Gawain, "though I think for me the evening may be over." He could feel his false smile starting to slip, and he simply wanted to be out of there as quickly as possible. "As you know, tomorrow is a day I must take with some seriousness." Again, Bertilac gave him a searching stare, but he made no further comment. "Very well, Gawain," he said, his tone becoming more serious. "Then we shall take our leave of one another. Tomorrow I shall provide a guide to lead you to the Green Chapel and your great Green Knight there. Farewell, Sir Knight. It has been a pleasure to meet you." He put out his hand, and Gawain shook it, feeling like a traitor as he did. It was such a silly game Lord Bertilac had put in place for them, and yet, in not revealing the green girdle to him, he felt like he'd broken the man's trust. "He has welcomed you into his home," his inner voice said. "This is not how things should have ended." He thought of the pentangle sigil on the shield Arthur had given to him, and of the knightly virtues it represented. Somehow he didn't think lying to your host was amongst them. "Thank you, my lord," was all he could think to say, cursing himself for a coward. "It has been a pleasure to meet you also." He left the great hall, but rather than retiring to his rooms, he walked out into the night air. He didn't know where he was heading in particular, but seeing a light in the castle's little chapel, he made his way there. He sat in the stillness and silence for a time, feeling its firm contrast to the swirling sounds of the great hall. "Can I help you, son?" came a gruff voice from by his side. A broad, calloused hand was laid on his shoulder, and Gawain looked up to see the chaplain looking down at him. He was the most unpriest-like priest he'd ever seen. Broad and ruddy-cheeked, with a wide, thick neck and meaty arms, he looked more like a blacksmith or a butcher than a clergyman. His nose had clearly been broken more than once, and some serious-looking scars made their way into his silver-grey hairline. Gawain realised that he was looking into the eyes of a warrior in this man, or at least one who had used to be so. "I know," said the chaplain, reading Gawain's reaction like a book. "I'm not what you might expect from a churchman." He sat down heavily, letting out a weary groan as he did so. "Let's just say that God's got a sense of humour. I expected to see out my last days on a battlefield, covered in guts and glory. Yet here I am, an old man, and in quite a different kind of armour." He chuckled at the quirkiness of fate. "But enough of me," he went on. "You have the look of a man with much on his mind. Why not lighten the load a little, eh?" Without hesitation, Gawain told him everything, and as he did, he felt there was a great well of emotion within him that was being drained away. When his story was over, he felt lighter, like he'd been dragging a millstone behind him, and while it hadn't been removed, someone had taken up some of the weight to help him shift it. He looked up, expecting to see judgment in the man's eyes, but it was nowhere to be found. "You've had quite the year, haven't you?" said the man. "Glory be, but you have. Well, firstly, let me tell you, well done." "What?" asked Gawain. "I don't feel like I've done anything deserving of congratulation." "You daft son," asked the chaplain. "That whole story, the journey you've been on, and all you can do is slap yourself in the face and say, 'I should have done better.' Goodness me, lad, stop flagellating yourself and look at the fruits of the seeds you've sown. Lives have been enriched by your presence, lives have been saved by your intervention. And you did it all without compromising your character, which is no mean feat, let me tell you." "But what about the green girdle?" asked Gawain. "I withheld it from Lord Bertilac. And should I even use it at all? Is it not showing a lack of faith in God if I rely on enchantment?" "Ah, yes," replied the gruff figure. "There you come to it. That one is a knotty problem. Here's the thing, Gawain. I can't tell you whether to use the sash or not. For all I know, it's a gift the good Lord has given you to survive the day because he's not done with you yet. And for all you know, it's no magic item at all, and just a handkerchief with delusions of grandeur." He chuckled at his joke, and Gawain smiled softly. "But I can tell you this. That which is from God seldom walks in shadow. What concerns me about this girdle of yours isn't so much what it is or what it might be. It's that you feel you have to hide it. That tells me it means you mischief. Secrets are a horrible weight to carry, and they're rarely carried for good reasons. This has the stench of secrecy all over it." Gawain sat back in his pew, the truth of the chaplain's words weighing heavy on his heart. "You're right," he said after a moment. "The secrecy is a burden. This whole place seems riddled with secrecy to me. From the moment I've arrived here, it's all been secrets and strangeness and mystery." "I know precisely what you mean," the chaplain replied. "I serve several chapels and churches about this area, but in this place, well, there is a sense of something deeply strange about it, as you say." He paused for a moment, as if lost in his thoughts. "But here's the thing, Gawain," he said, returning to the topic at hand. "It's your choice to succumb to that strangeness or not. Like I say, I can't tell you to wear the sash or not, but if it's something that you can't wear loudly and proudly, then that tells me it probably shouldn't be worn at all." Gawain thanked the chaplain warmly, and they talked for a little while longer. Then they prayed together, and Gawain went on his way to find his bed. He slept surprisingly well, given what awaited him the next morning, and he woke up feeling rested and alert. He lay in his bed for a few moments longer, waiting to see if there might come a tap-tap-tapping on the door. He was not surprised when it didn't arrive. Their meeting the day before had held the feeling of finality. What did come, though, was the delivery of his armour. Clearly it had been worked on and repaired during his time at the castle because it gleamed and shone. Every scratch and dent had been removed and it looked practically new-made. As he put it on again and felt the familiar weight of it encompassing him, he felt somehow at home. This was who he was and who he was meant to be. There were no secrets or mysteries here, just a man with a plain purpose. He held the green girdle in his hand for a long time, agonizing over his decision. Eventually he wrapped it around his middle, tying it to the side. It sat proudly on top of his gleaming armour, contrasting with the red of his surcoat, cloak and shield, but somehow it seemed right. He nodded at himself in the mirror and strode out to the stables. Greeting Gringolet, he led him out to the courtyard to meet Lord Bertilac's guide, and as the blue light of dawn gave way to gold, He rode away from the castle Haute Desert. As he looked back for one last glance, he saw a figure watching him from a high window. Mallory. The old crone unleashed that unsettling smile of hers and raised a hand in parting. "That," said the voice in Gawain's head, "is one person I shall be glad never to have to see again." Setting his face forward, he rode out to face his fate. Thank you for listening. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a Settle Stories commission. Written and read for you by Jon Buckeridge. Story consultant was Miriam Sarin. Music was Tectonic by Saedra, downloaded via Uppbeat. It was a Parable Arts production.